The year was 2006. At that time, the Game Boy Advance was the most popular handheld console to date, a console that was very near and dear. It was a game console that caused a friendship, which was sparked by one of the most beloved Nintendo characters of all time, Super Mario.
So yeah, in 2006, I actually met my best friend in school. We were both Super Mario fans. We both loved playing the games. We actually went to each other's houses and we actually tried playing a couple of levels of each other's games, just trying to help each other to advance in the game. And you know what? We had such amazing times together. But there was one thing that this person actually did for me, and still to this day I am very grateful for what he has done so far. And that is the fact that my best friend Matthew introduced me to spriting. So the way I actually started spriting back in 2006 was I pretty much was working with backgrounds. And the way I worked it was I pretty much took a previously used Super Mario background from any random video game. Either it was Super Mario World, Super Mario Bros. 3, or maybe any type of background from a previously used Mario game. And basically what I would have done is I would have made custom backgrounds to where you would pretty much have a custom level, if you will. So yeah, I pretty much did that for most of elementary school. And at the end of the day, I mean, it was pretty much an eye-opener to just experience, how important it was to learn the craft of how a background or an animation is pretty much done. But then everything changed when Super Mario Bros. Z came into the picture. Super Mario Bros. Z, still to this day, the most beautiful sprite animation ever made. Created by the legendary spriter Alvin Earthworm and broadcasted on Newgrounds and YouTube.com, this sprite animation stood the test of time. And when I saw Super Mario Bros. Z, I wanted in on the action. There was just one problem. I was a child. I had no money, nor did I have the resources that I needed in order to make a good sprite animation as good as Super Mario Bros. Z. Yeah, so hands up. Macromedia Flash was the animation software at the time, and I could not afford it for beans. I mean, as much as I wanted to get my hands on the software, unfortunately it was beyond my reach, and I never ever owned a copy of Macromedia Flash, specifically Pro 8, which was actually the software that I wanted to obtain. Unfortunately, that never happened and result in piracy, which now to this day I do regret because, mind you, I was a kid. I didn't want to pay for software, and at that time, I mean, I just wanted to start making animation in elementary school, or rather, start of high school, rather, and I was just starting to get into spriting, and I wanted, like, the best software to use in order to be as good as Alvin Earthworm. And unfortunately, I had to rely on the tools that were available to me at the time. And unfortunately for me, the tools in the trade at the time were MS Paint and Windows Movie Maker. As a result, all of this ran on a Dell Dimension E521. But thankfully, by the grace of the golden era of YouTube, I actually came across a user who went by the name of Ratchet Lombax. And by using the resources that were available at the time for me, he was actually able to introduce to me a method of spriting which to this day I still take to heart. And that was the idea of paste and play, which was very frowned upon at the time, but for people who had very limited resources, it was pretty much the best way to sprite. I would have loved to share with you guys Ratchet Lombax's animations of Super Mario Adventure X, which was his show at the time. Unfortunately, that has fallen into obscurity as, I mean, still to this day, I'm still looking for Ratchet Lombax's YouTube channel, and it no longer exists, unfortunately. I want to go back and relive all of those amazing episodes that I saw at the time, where you had Mario, Sonic, Rayman, you had Cicletta, you had Bowser as the main villain, you had the Star Rod as the MacGuffin, you had Princess Peach kidnapped. I mean, this was pretty much the basic type of animation that you can do with MS Paint, Windows Movie Maker, and at that time, I mean, it was just how groundbreaking that even the smallest amount of resources, you could still make something beautiful. It's just a shame that Ratchet Lombax closed his YouTube channel, and sadly, we haven't seen him ever since. Speaking of media that went into obscurity, even the fan-made website Viglin, or Video Game Land, which hosted Super Mario Bros. Z, also went offline due to copyright issues with Nintendo. And unfortunately, that was a major blow to pretty much the entire fan base of Super Mario Bros. Z, myself included, because at that time, I was trying to make a name for myself by doing something completely different, which got me started with sprite animation. So to tell you the truth, I actually started spriting by making sprite comics at the time within the Viglin community. And at that time, I was using 8-bit sprites, and I wanted to do Super Mario, basically my own version of Super Mario Adventure X. And at that time, I was doing classic Super Mario World, where you had Mario go through Dinosaur Land and end up fighting basically all the Koopalings in order to reach Princess Peach. And then once Viglin went offline, basically everybody lost everything. And so all of my sprite comics that I've ever made, they all went down the toilet along with everybody else's content. So I unfortunately lost all of my comics, and so did a lot of people when the site went down. And I'm not gonna lie, it was by far the darkest day of spriting. So with the abandonment of sprite comics, I actually tried to go into Windows Movie Maker and try to convert all of my sprite comics into videos, which unfortunately, the very first video I've ever made of spriting did not see the light of day, as I had no plot, as I had no story to follow, and to make matters worse, it was just a disaster waiting to happen. And when one door finally closed, another door opened. Enter DeviantArt.com. With the help of DeviantArt.com, I was able to acquire the very sprites that I needed in order to start my animation. And that was the very first sprite sheet that got me started to making my very first video on October 25th, 2009. The date was October 25th, 2009. And that was the very day when I released my very first video, Axer Rangers X, Episode 1. And with that, it was also the start of my YouTube channel, known to this day as BioSoft Studios. Now at that time, in 2009, another sprite animation was making its rounds on YouTube, and that was called the SSS Show, also known as Sonic, Shadow, and Silver. Now, unlike Sonic, Shadow, and Silver Show, Axer Rangers X did things a lot differently. For example, instead of SPO playing Karma Chameleon on the radio, you had the Axem Rangers playing on guitar, piano, and drums, Robot Rock by Daft Punk. The biggest difference between Axem Rangers X and my previous sprite animation was the fact that Axem Rangers X actually did follow a formula. Whereas in Power Rangers, it's always fight the bad guy, the guy becomes big. Get a robot, the Power Rangers save the day. I wanted to do things a bit differently, so instead, we had Axem Rangers facing real-life situations, whereas at the end of the day, you're not always gonna be in a mech when you're fighting bad guys. I mean, this is as real as it gets. You're not gonna fight the same villain over and over and over again, and you're not gonna end up following the same formula every day. So to be quite honest with you, that was one of the big core differences between Axem Rangers X against its competition, that being Sonic, Shadow, and Silver Show. So yeah, with the success of Paste and Play for over a month, mind you, I had to do every episode during the weekend, so it was like every weekend, release an episode, release an episode, release an episode. And basically, this whole formula continued until between episode 6, 7, and 8, where episodes 6, 7, and 8, that's when I actually introduced a first story arc, where we had Gratis as the main villain, Princess Rosalina was the damsel in distress, Red was obviously the hero, but at the same time it was also the introduction of a couple of OCs, which were very famously made by myself as well as Deoxys9368, which still to this day, we're still constantly supporting one another. And he is always the first member on the credits list whenever it says special thanks. His name is always the first to show up. So anyway, back to the main story. So basically what happened was we were working on episode 6, 7, and 8. All was well and good. And then a virus infected my computer. So because of this, it pretty much caused the BSOD, also known as the blue screen of death. Unfortunately, it wiped everything, including all of my sprites that I've worked on for the last month. And because of this, I had to pretty much start episode 8 from scratch. Thankfully, not all hope was lost. The biggest drawback was obviously the Doom ship that looked completely different compared to what it looked like in the previous episodes. So yeah, that was pretty much the biggest kick in the rear. And you know what? It taught me one important, valuable lesson. Never rely on piracy. Once our first story arc was completed, we then went back to the standard formula where every weekend we would release a new episode every week, and then finally came episode 12, which still to this day is regarded as the most infamous and quite possibly the worst episode. With over 12 dislikes on YouTube and counting, this was the very first episode to introduce voice clips from various different media. And at the time, that was very frowned upon. In fact, so frowned upon that it would get mass disliked to the point that the entire episode is not searchable in the YouTube algorithm. So yeah, at that time, SMG4 standards were not accepted in the spriting community back in 2009 when voice clips were used from various forms of media. At that time, it was pretty much strict voice acting with either voice or text-to-speech from Speakonia or sound effects from the actual video games. So yeah, it was a hard time back in 2009, 2010 because, I mean, as I said, you could not use any form of media on YouTube or not even in movies. I mean, even if you used one little piece of media, you would get attacked, you would get disliked, and obviously your new episode would just be going down the drain because you used a piece of media that was, you thought it was okay to use, but at the end of the day, nobody likes it. I mean, and even still to this day, I just look away from episode 12 because, to be honest with you, after that, we decided, you know what, let's not do this anymore. Let's not use any more voice clips from various forms of media. Let's just continue with Speakonia, voice acting, and that was the brunt of it. That was how strict the spriting community was way back then. And to be honest with you, it was a very difficult time. It really was. After the completion of 15 episodes, we then moved on to create our first full-length movie, which was dubbed An Evil Voice of the Future. This was the very first time we've ever done a full-length movie that was way above the standard runtime, which was around 40 minutes to an hour, give or take a few. But at the end of the day, this was our first attempt. And this story was also very necessary as it was the bridge between Season 1 and Season 2 where everything changed. Axer Merges X Season 2 was the introduction where we had multiple voice actors. With the inclusion of multiple voice actors, the rest was history. The funny thing about all of this was that at the time, I was actually getting back into WWE. And at the time when I was watching WWE again, they were showing WWE Extreme Rules live on pay-per-view. And still to this day, Extreme Rules is by far my favorite pay-per-view out of all of them. Just for the simple fact that every match you are allowed to use weapons. And it could be any type of match. It could be a steel cage. It could be last man standing. It could be a strap match where you and your opponent are bound together by a strap. And you have to beat each other before you touch the four corners uninterrupted and in succession. There was a lot of crazy matches. Even a ladder match, for Pete's sakes. I mean, At that time, Extreme Rules was the pay-per-view for me because I loved the violence. I mean, I really enjoyed seeing somebody get hit with a chair. And because of all this, it inspired me to start working on my own animated wrestling series, which ended up becoming the main movie at the end of every season. And so the very first free per-view movie we've ever worked on was actually Lockdown. And ladies and gentlemen, this was the very first attempt at our first wrestling show. And ladies and gentlemen, it was a success. I mean, we've had a full hour of non-stop wrestling. And just like Extreme Rules, every match was completely different. We had weapons, we had someone trying to sacrifice his hair, we had a steel cage, we had basically all kinds of matches that hardcore fans would be accustomed to. And with the success of Season 2, featuring new voice actors and a wrestling show at the end of the season, the formula was repeated for the next couple of seasons. In 2011, my best friend came into play. His name, Christian Henry Gavard. Yeah, so I met him at high school. Basically what happened was, during high school, one day I unfortunately injured my knee. Spent at least 12 hours in the hospital, and let me tell you, that was not fun whatsoever. So a week after my recovery, I actually went back to school and asked the principal if I can change my class from physical education to something else, because let's face it, I mean, I wasn't going to go back to the gym with just one good knee, so that was pretty much impossible. So thankfully the principal accepted, and they gave me media and communications, to which that was the very day I met Christian. And basically this man was, I mean, you could tell that, you know, you meet one person in your life who becomes your best friend, and somehow he pretty much changes your life forever. And that was pretty much exactly the case of what happened between me and Christian. And one thing that Christian actually did for me was he introduced me to all the tools required in the field, which eventually I finally managed to obtain. And those were Photoshop and Premiere. Well, still to this day, those are still the two softwares that I use. Only difference is I use the Elements version because it's the homeowner's edition, and plus I didn't want to pay $4,000 for the actual software itself. And mind you, back then, subscription was not an option. Back then, it was all perpetual, which means it would have cost at least $1,000 or $2,000 just for the software in general. But yeah, I've spent at least 2 years with this man, learning the craft, learning how animation works, learning the different art styles of animation as well, such as claymation, stop motion. But then in 2010, tragedy struck. It was in 2010 that I found out that Christian was admitted to the hospital, and unfortunately he was diagnosed with cancer. And so graduation 2010, I went up to the podium, picked up a scholarship award for creative arts and creative writing, and Christian was there, and he was the one who handed me the award. I'm not gonna lie, that was very emotional for me, and sadly that was the very last time I ever saw him. And then on February 2011, it was announced in the bulletins that Christian Henry Gavard passed away. I'm not gonna lie, I was devastated. And you know what? Still to this day, I appreciate everything that he's done for me. I appreciate the career path that he offered me, to which I still take to heart. I mean, let's face it, without Christian, I would not be here today making animation content just for you guys. Without him, I'd rather be, I don't know, maybe doing another career. Honestly, without him, I wouldn't even be here today. And now, before we continue with this video, I would like to take at least a moment of silence to remember my best friend from high school. Christian Henry Gavard, my best friend, my mentor, I hope you rest in peace. At that same year, in 2011, I was enrolled to Dawson College. And from there, I ended up taking on the Arts and Culture program, to which I was able to animate the entirety of Season 9 in college. Not just in my Arts and Culture class, but in animation as well. With the popularity in college and all the fans that I've gained over the years, I actually submitted Season 9 alone to the Dawson College Arts and Culture Gala. So yeah, that was my entry to the Dawson College Arts and Culture Gala. And what actually ended up happening is I actually ended up being nominated for 3rd place. I mean, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, it really is a great honor to be pretty much nominated for an award. And I'm not gonna lie, I am a bit salty, specifically for the fact that, you had 1st place, you had 2nd place, but there's no prize for 3rd place. I mean, regardless though, I am still to this day very grateful that I was nominated for the award. And it really goes to show with all this creativity that, anything is possible, basically. In fact, one of my best friends from college introduced me to Spectrum Productions, and that is where I was able to take my animation to the next level. So ever since joining forces with Spectrum Productions, they have been supporting this show of Axer Ranges X. I mean, still to this day, every time you see the new wrestling shows, Spectrum Productions always shows up next to the channel name. And basically, for those that don't know, or for those who haven't seen the show and are interested, Spectrum Productions is a non-profit organization helping youth on the autism spectrum getting their ideas on the big screen. So basically what they do is they work with people with autism and various different types of disabilities, and basically what they do is they help prepare them for video production. So if these people have an idea for maybe a movie or a TV show that they want to do, basically these people prepare them with basically all the tools required. So basically editing software, cameras, and basically they have the power to create their own videos with the help of Spectrum. And that's the beautiful thing about these guys, is that basically anybody with disabilities can grab a camera, start filming, and they can already start making an indie TV show or an indie animation or even a movie, for Pete's sake. I mean, I was enrolled in the stage program. I was taught basically how to man a camera, how to properly animate characters. And at the end of the day, it was a really great experience to be able to learn all of these things. And basically, these guys were able to continue what Christian started. So because of these guys, I mean, still to this day, I am very grateful that I was able to be a part of the community. And still to this day, these guys are still supporting my show. And at the end of the day, I mean, it really goes to show how much of an impact a company can have on people with disabilities. I mean, it's just incredible. In fact, Spectrum Productions actually supported this series so much that they gave me permission to animate an entire season inside their production studio, that being season 13, to which I was able to animate one of the most gruesome episodes in history. The support continued even further with the introduction of their new show, Spectrum Live, where with every week they would show a different category for any different type of production, whether it was horror, music, or animation. Various videos were submitted and they were all featured in a live stream show. This specific episode, for instance, episode 256, can be seen in episode 3 of Spectrum Live, dubbed Video Games. During that time, I was actually trying to pitch an idea with Spectrum so that Axer Ranges X could be a potential reoccurring show for Spectrum Live. Unfortunately, that did not go through. And yeah, the show has been put on hiatus since then. I believe it was last year that they aired the final episode of Spectrum Live. But at the same time, I mean, season 18 was a groundbreaking season. It was the very first season where I stepped up production, in which I actually sped up the animations for paste and play. It didn't really do much, but at least it tried to convey a much more dramatic tale. And at the same time, it was also the introduction of international voices. So for the very first time, we actually got in contact with Parlamundo at the time, and they were able to provide us with an app which was able to offer international text-to-speech voices. In season 18, the common language that the locals spoke was Arabic. So I needed Arab voice actors in order to basically complete the season. And with the introduction of Scorpion, Pharaoh, and his son, I mean, we managed to get a library of different types of international voices. And at the end of the day, the season was a success, thanks to Parlamundo. Unfortunately then, with a new update, Parlamundo went into obscurity. And Speak It ended up acquiring the rights to those voices. So with Speak It nowadays, I mean, the big advantage is that now you can actually use these international voices to speak English, which is something that Parlamundo never did, but you can still potentially use these voices in their native language. The only difference is now English is an optional language to select whenever you're using Speak It as the main application. As for Parlamundo, I have not seen any updates ever since, and it pretty much became one of those apps that time unfortunately forgot. At the same time, I was reintroduced to one of my favorite childhood animes of all time, and that was Sailor Moon. Because of the popularity of Sailor Moon, and specifically the season that I watched, I managed to create a crossover series dubbed Sailor Ranger Zags, in which the entire series ran for 30 seasons plus a full-length movie, which then transitioned to season 18, which would then become the continuation of the whole story. 3 seasons later, for the first time ever, I introduced the first ever 3-part series finale, dubbed Game of Chess. The way this entire season was structured was the fact that I ended up releasing Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3 at different times of the year, with Part 1 being the start of the war, Part 2 being the intermission, and Part 3 being the build-up, which led to the final battle, hence the name The Throne of Immortals. With the conclusion of Parts 1, 2, and 3 of Game of Chess, Throne of Immortals was considered the final movie that ended the Axer Rangers X series, and thus putting an end to one of the most fearsome villains in the entire series. But not only did Throne of Immortals push the boundaries of what was possible, Throne of Immortals also introduced something new into the series. You see, Game of Chess Throne of Immortals was also the introduction of 3D modeling and animation, to which, for the very first time, Autodesk 3ds Max was introduced into the pipeline, and this was used to create the Mirror Kingdom of Hell, which was one of the environments that the Axem Rangers had to go through in order to reach the castle of Nibiru. In the end, all of the backgrounds were rendered using Mental Ray, and at the end of the day, the movie itself was a success thanks to the inclusion of Autodesk 3ds Max. So yeah, in 2015, I got enrolled into Herzing College, to which I applied for the field of 3D animation and CGI. I could have enrolled in Dawson College, but unfortunately, Dawson was very competitive. 30 people apply, only 12 get accepted. So yeah, that was unfortunately very bitter for me because, mind you, animation was the entire career that I wanted to go to. I even tried applying for Concordia University on animation, and I unfortunately ended up with a letter of rejection. So yeah, that was out the window, so I pretty much enrolled in Herzing, and the rest was history. And what's actually funny about 3ds Max was at the time I was also getting into Mugen, to which I was able to download the software, managed to download a couple of characters, put them all in 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 fights, and then the patch came in which caused me to create 6-player brawls, 8-player brawls, and the rest is history. So 3ds Max was also responsible for all the match cards, the early match cards, when the season began. And then 3ds Max expired. There was no way in heck I was going to pay $5,000 every 3 years just to continue using 3ds Max. Impossible. So I ended up, unfortunately, abandoning ship, and I did not appreciate the practice that Autodesk was aiming for, that being subscription, to which, yes, this was a subscription license where every 3 years you would have to pay $5,000 just to keep using the software, and the software itself, the pricing was insane. It wasn't worth it to continue using the software, to which I had to spend an entire year without 3D software, and that was when I discovered Maxon Cinema 4D, to which I actually did end up acquiring when I ended up getting a job in visual effects. And so with the salary, I was actually able to acquire Cinema 4D for myself, learn the craft, and because I was already proficient with 3ds Max, I was able to learn very quickly how to do animation, how to do modeling, and honestly, Cinema 4D is the easier software to learn as far as 3D animation is concerned. And I was able to get back into modeling match cards for Mugen, and you know what, at the end of the day, because of Cinema 4D, I was able to get back into Mugen, and now you wonder why I'm still making all of those episodes still to this day. It's because Cinema 4D kept me going even when 3ds Max kicked me down to the ground. At that time, YouTube was also very lenient as far as monetization was concerned. I mean, mind you, I was actually involved in the YouTube partnership program when it started, and basically Mugen was my source of income at the time. And then everything changed when they started adjusting the policy to which you had to have at least 1,000 subscribers. Unfortunately, that's when the YouTube partnership was thrown out the window for me. And unfortunately, I had to rely on finding myself a job, to which I was able to get into VFX, to which, thank goodness, I was able to do so, because at the end of the day, with monetization out the window, there was no recourse other than searching for a job, to which I did graduate back in 2016 in Herzing College for the field of 3D animation and CGI. Thanks to them, I was able to acquire a job in visual effects, and that was my ticket to getting into Cinema 4D and all of the crazy stuff that you see nowadays. With Season 21 of Axer Rangers X finally completed, I then moved on to Axer Rangers S, which was a spin-off of the successful Axer Rangers X series. Now, unfortunately for Axer Rangers S, it was pretty much a dumpster fire when it started. There was no plot, there was no storyline, it was just improv episode after improv episode with no plot whatsoever. So at the time, I was pretty much piecing together story after story after story, hiring multiple voice actors in order to try to convince a story that was good enough for the blue antivirus you all know today. In fact, Axer Rangers X was pretty much the biggest dumpster fire I've ever created, to which we even tried to create a story arc where we had multiple different factions trying to compete in ARX wrestling, to which I'm not gonna lie, it was a good experience, but at the same time, it wasn't the story for my antivirus. And heck, I do remember one time where I actually got Glitch Productions involved, where I actually made all the sprites of the Meta Runner cast. And ladies and gentlemen, even though I did have a lot of fun making that season and making all those episodes, unfortunately, even still to this day, it wasn't the story for my antivirus. So I was once again forced into a wall where I had to come up with a decision. And thankfully, when I was looking into the archives, I was able to discover something incredible. Yeah, so despite all of the fun that I've had, all of the voice actors that I've hired, and all those amazing things, unfortunately, Glitch ended up being caught in controversy, to which they actually fired one of their voice actresses without even informing them, which sparked a big, huge backlash with all of the original voice actors pretty much jumping ship from Glitch Productions. And because of that, I pretty much abandoned all hope for glitch, and even still to this day, I have not created a single sprite or animation of any of the glitch characters ever since. And as for the voice actors to which I have hired over the years, I pretty much had to reassign them different roles in order to stay away from glitch productions as much as possible. Please research the controversy for yourself. I mean, it really was a dumpster fire, and I have not watched a single episode of Glitch Productions ever since the controversy. I have no reason to continue supporting a company that's just going to get involved with controversy, that's going to spark major backlash to the community, and you know what? Good riddance. So during Season 8, I actually stumbled upon a little piece from the old archives from high school. And apparently, you're not going to believe this, this was apparently an old scrapped novel that I was actually trying to write. It was called Virus Attack, and for some reason, I don't know why, but this was basically the catalyst that sparked the major story, which you all know today as Virus AI. And so, starting with Season 8, we actually tried to test the waters in order to make sure that this was the story for our antivirus, and sure enough, it succeeded, and with the inclusion of antiviruses, nanobots, and any type of malware that you would expect on a normal computer, we finally found the story that fit perfectly for the antivirus. So yeah, Season 12, we wanted to introduce a new character who was basically going to finally be the love interest for R4, and so we decided to give him a character named Liz, also known as Liz Elizabeth Rose. At the time, when I was trying to search for a voice actress, unfortunately, the rates were high, and so I was reduced to search for a sound-alike. And then came Virus AI 5, to which, for the very first time in the history of this show, the pipeline had completely changed. Before, we used to use Windows Movie Maker and Microsoft Paint, specifically of Paste and Play, but then Blackmagic Fusion Studio was introduced, and everything changed. An entire array of animations was created in order to accommodate for Blackmagic Fusion Studio, and with that, every single character you've seen lately in the new episodes of Axer Ranges S has their own animations, respectively. And then came Virus AI 6, also known as Virus AI Win, Lose or Die. This was the very first season where we introduced visual effects animations in combination with 2D animation. And because of the scale of this animation, we pretty much pushed the envelope of what was possible in order to make the animation stand out compared to all the other animations in the past. I have one episode that has just been released, and I'm gonna take you guys through it, you know, the behind the scenes of all this, because all I'm gonna say for now is that this is one episode of the entire series that I was actually willing to delete. And I will explain why. So, before we start, let's go to the sprites. So, oh boy, a lot of stuff has been done to him over the years. I gave him, let's see. I gave him disguises. I gave him a civilian version for Toby Robin Adventures. Gave him a glide cycle. Gave him an RCH1, which, by the way, the RCH1 does have its own VFX, so that's pretty cool. Let's see, what else did I give him? I think I gave him a disguise to make him look like SMG4. Let's see if I can actually find it here. There we go. So I gave him the disguise of SMG4 because obviously he had to wear a disguise in order to foil one of the enemy's plans, so that's fun. And we got him a super form, so yeah, awesome. Oh yes, and let's not forget the time he got infected with a thorium virus. So yeah. Man, how time flies. So, yeah, a lot of stuff has happened. And mind you, it all started with this sprite here. Young Boyd when he was a kid. And now here he is, a cold-blooded antivirus. So you could tell, ladies and gentlemen, all the years it took from one small little sprite of a little boy with a blue hat, and next thing you know, he ends up turning into the antivirus, which you all know today. So, a lot of stuff has happened to this guy. And It's only going to get bigger and bigger from here. So yeah, welcome to Virus AI. Let's move right along to Liz. And this is actually an interesting story. It all started with these two. I remembered one time I went to YouTube just to listen to some ASMR. Yes, I'm that type of guy who listens to ASMR when I try to sleep. And what happened was I got inspired by one of these artists that I said, you know what? I want to make their characters into sprites. And I did. I asked the artist if there was any way that I can have these characters in the series. And after a bit of back and forth, we pretty much sat down on DeviantArt and we pretty much came across a concept that we created together, which you guys nowadays know as Liz. And to be honest with you, the longest yet the most satisfying sprites that we've ever created together. And you know what? I am very grateful for this artist for lending her feedback, because without this character, we wouldn't have any progress with the story whatsoever. And I really have to give props to this artist individual, so Little Ball of Giggles, this is for you. So this specific episode, I made a lot of changes to it. First change you're going to notice, episode 14. That's right. It was supposed to be episode 1. First things first, whenever I start an episode, frame number 3 is always the empty one. So with frame number 3, I can always, change the titles however I want. In this case, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to put it as episode 14 instead of episode 1. And I'm going to take you through the whole thing. So here we go. Castle Tenebrizia. There we see Liz picking up a phone. Now, this is actually the very first time I've ever done a VFX shot like this. So basically what I've done is a triple split screen. What I did is I put a still frame of Liz on the side to the left. And then I put 2 split screens on the right side. And I made them small because I wanted to do like a 3-corner split screen when you're playing Nintendo 64 and you only have 3 players. So something like that, basically. What I did was I put Liz over the top. I wanted that picture to be the dominant frame because everything behind it is basically everything that's moving. So as you can actually see right now, we got 2 characters moving behind Liz's frame, and it's just working flawlessly. So they're picking up the phone and they're taking the call. This was probably one of the most difficult animations to do because when I started this, the problem was Liz's frame was actually in the back. So when I added these characters into Fusion, what ended up happening was these 2 characters, these 2 new characters with their phones, they were clipping through Liz. So it's like there were 3 princesses in the same frame. So what I had to do was I had to cut Liz's piece and put it on top. And now that's how you get the frame that's happening right now. Next, let's talk about these 2 characters. So over time I said, you know what? Liz is unfortunately getting lonely. We should give her some friends. So that's exactly what I did. I went online to DeviantArt and I found some new princess sprites that we could possibly use. We just gave Liz some friends to play with. So, the backstory that I had for those 2 was obviously Liz knew these friends from school because they all went to school together when they were children. So I thought, you know what? It would be nice to have these 3 characters reunite with each other. And that's pretty much what this whole episode is about. Liz reuniting with her school friends. And so, here they are. So, let me introduce you to them. The pink one, Lana Shokora. And the purple one, Mimi, Beatrice, Maya. But basically, Liz calls them Lana and Beatrice. Those are the 2 new characters in the series.
This is Beatrice?
So basically what's happening in this scene is that Liz is basically calling her longtime friends and inviting them to a vacation. which is
I've
all
had
well and
better
good
days ever since I
because
moved
they
into my new
deserve it
castle.
after everything that
Such
happened. I mean,
workers
mind
always
you,
doing
if
things
you
wrong
haven't
again.
seen Virus AI6, again, go check it out. But basically,
second.
Liz has been through a lot since Virus AI6, and they deserve
Lance,
a
you
break.
bastard!
So,
Quit fucking around with my maid and get back to work!
okay, this is actually a funny scene that I crafted. So, Beatrice, she's basically the angry princess in the sense that she has a lot of incompetent workers, and so sometimes when she speaks, she'll just turn around, point to her servants, and yell at them for apparent reasons. So in this case, one of her servants was messing around with the maid, and so Beatrice
Hold on a
called him
second.
out on it. So, here you go.
Lance, you bastard! Quit fucking around with my maid and get back to work!
And then she turns her attention back to Liz, just to continue the conversation. And then what happens here is that Liz basically invites the girls to South
God,
Rebay.
Liz, are you serious? Are we actually going to South Rebay? Did you know that South Rebay has always been on my bucket list?
So basically, Liz is inviting the girls to South Rebay, which
Are you
is known
kidding, Liz?
in
I've always
Apophis
wanted to go
as the
visit
Old
the Old
West.
West.
So yeah, this is gonna be a Western episode, and crazy enough,
on, we
we've
all used to
never
go to school
done
together.
a
Of course
Western
I'll join
episode
you.
before. This is probably the first time we've ever done a Western episode in history.
How about at the
And
Broadcourt
you know
Castle
what?
Terminal bus stop?
I thought,
I heard there's a bus that can take us directly to South Rebay.
and I thought, you know what? Why don't we start with a bang and we finish with a bang? And what better way to do it than to introduce two new characters in the
Great, I'll
series
see you soon.
just for a vacation episode
Lance,
in the
I
Old
thought I
West.
told you to
So,
get back to work.
yeah, the introduction of Lana and Beatrice. And then, of course, Liz exits the room, gets ready, and they meet at Boncourt. And right now they're reminiscing over the last time they saw each other, which was at the field trip during Virus
I remember
AI6,
now.
which we never
good
saw
times.
them because the main focus was on the antivirus and the Axer Rangers. So basically, this is the first time we're actually seeing these characters actually interact with each other on camera. Despite the fact that it has been mentioned that they have been interacting with each other for longer than what we've seen. So basically, this is just the first time the fans get to see these characters. Okay, this is actually a crazy transition that I put together. So basically what I did was I put two frames. One frame was with the princesses, the other one was without them. So then what I did was I went into Blackmagic Fusion, brought in this bus. The bus comes in, all the princesses are there. Once the bus leaves, the princesses are gone. And there you have it. So now all the princesses are sitting on the bus, and ladies and gentlemen, I mean, they're pretty much interacting with each other the way they normally do. They're just schoolgirls looking to have fun, and that's pretty much what Liz wants to do. They mentioned a couple of attractions like the Stockholm Theater, where they can go on stage with toy pistols and have a duel
I cannot
together.
wait to go to the
And,
theater. I would
yeah,
love to challenge
this
you and
is,
Beatrice to a three-quarter duel. And once the duel is over, I will win.
And yeah, unfortunately for this episode, the theater, unfortunately, we never had time to do that. So we actually did the duel on the outside, but we didn't show the complete duel. We only did a snippet of it because, I mean, at the end of the day, it was the end of the episode. So we just want to see, you know, Liz, Lana, and Beatrice just having fun. Because that's what girls do. So the theater unfortunately never came to pass. So yeah, we have just the girls having fun as they're on their way to the theater to have the gunfight. So yeah, spoiler alert, that's actually how the episode ends. So now, enough with the talk, let's just quickly jump to the next scene. Okay, so here we are. We are in the Old West, and yeah, there's a bit of product placement, but who cares about that? So, yeah, South Rebay, also known as the Old West. Again, this is the first time we've ever had an Old West episode.
Wow, this place is beautiful. It's rustic, it's old school. This place is perfect for a night out of town.
So yeah, right now all the girls are pretty much reminiscing over what the Old West looks like compared to what their world looks like back home. So now they're gonna head into the saloon and talk things over. So there we go. We have the saloon. And for this scene, the bartender and the butler,
Spittoon.
they all come from the video game Stardew Valley. So I gotta give thanks to Poltergeist, who actually did lots of the sprites for these NPCs. So yeah. Fun fact, actually, if you watched Virus 6, Macaulay, the realtor, is actually made by Poltergeist. Lana, Beatrice, and Liz are all catching up on, all the things that happened in the past. So,
You never told us you had a boyfriend!
so as you just saw, Liz just announced that she has a fiance. And unfortunately, Lana and Beatrice never heard about all this. So this is the first time that Liz mentions that she has a fiance, and the fiance, of course, as you all know, the antivirus. So yeah, they're all just pretty much catching up on everything that happened in the past, and it really is an important episode when you're introducing two characters and you want them to be up to speed with what's been happening with their best friend's life.
Elizabeth,
So
you naughty little girl. How long were you going to keep this a secret?
okay, this character is very important to the scene because this is the character who pretty much explains what the Old West is like right now in the present day to these three girls. So, ladies and gentlemen, this character right here is Sheriff J.W. Pippin. So, fun fact, the name actually originated from Sheriff J.W. Pepper from the James Bond series. So, for those of you that do not know, and for those of you that have never seen James Bond, Sheriff J.W. Pepper is actually a character from two of the Bond films in the Roger Moore era, Live and Let Die and The Man with the Golden Gun. He's pretty much a character that tags along for a car chase, basically. So, yeah, that's pretty much how I got inspired by the name of J.W. Pippin. And that's exactly the type of character we have here. And the only difference with this character is the fact that this character is supposed to provide exposition before ultimately becoming the sacrificial
Sheriff
profile.
J.W. Pippin. I own this here town. You girls must be visiting, ain't you?
And one thing I should mention about this character, he is voiced by Fortress Maximus
Sure,
IDW, who is
I
an
myself
amazing
have been
actor.
protecting
He's
this
voiced
town
a lot
for
of
over
villains
50
in the
years
past,
now.
specifically
Arresting crooks,
Cassim
bounty hunting,
Abdil,
shootouts,
Webroot,
gunmen,
Supreme
and yet
AI.
I
All
still
these
haven't received
voices
recognition
are Fortress
those
Maximus
greedy
IDW.
bastards.
So he brings a lot of depth to most of the villains
Have you ever
in
tried
this show.
asking the mayor
So
for a day of celebration?
mad respect for him. So right now, Sheriff Pippin is
Well,
basically
now, looks
explaining
like we
exactly
have
what's
another
happening in the
city
Old
being
West,
blinded by
how they
corruption.
refuse to give him a day of
Excuse me?
celebration because of all the work
The
he's
sheriff
done
is
over the
always
past 50
entitled
years.
to a day of celebration.
And of course, they
The fact that
smell
the mayor is
corruption,
refusing to
which is
allow
exactly
that
what
is a sign of
happens in the
corruption.
Apophis Police
But then
Department.
again,
So,
that's just my take
unfortunately,
on your situation.
Officer Sarah, you can't really blame her for, everything that is happening.
What?
But at the end of the day,
When
keep
the
her
fuck
away
did
from
this
everything.
happen?
So, yeah. Basically, now the girls are pretty much introducing themselves. That's
Tell
when
me,
he's going to
princesses,
explain all the
why
dangers
visit my
of the Old
town
West,
of all
which
places?
unfortunately
Haven't you
the
heard
girls
that there
are not
are
aware
outlaws
of.
at this time of
So,
night? They
yeah.
be always causing trouble. Last night, they murdered my deputy. And if you're not careful, they'll murder you as
So yeah,
well.
there's the warning that Sheriff Pippin delivers to the girls, that if they're not careful, that they might end up being captured by outlaws. And unfortunately, that's
Look,
exactly what
ladies,
happens
I suggest
in
you make
this
like
episode.
cattle
And right
and
now, as you can
hightail it out of
see,
here before.
Sheriff J.W. Pippin has just been reduced to a sacrificial goat file. And making his triumphant return, or his infamous return, if you haven't seen the Iron Cliff episode of Virus AI Control Alt Delete, yes, Jeeves from SMG4 makes his return as a triumphant villain, and he points a gun at the princesses. So basically, just for context, Jeeves owns the town. So Jeeves pretty much killed the sheriff, and now he's the owner of Southwood Bay. So because of this, Jeeves decrees that under the management of the Meadow Cliff, everybody must be forced to do manual labor, because obviously the Meadow Cliff is no longer in business, and because of that, Jeeves basically lost everything because of the antivirus, and now he's basically trying to build it back. So
Liz, what the fuck do we do? I don't want to die.
So basically, Jeeves needs a couple of workers, and because Liz is well known with the antivirus, he thought, you know what? I should get revenge on the person that put me out of business by taking his fiancée and making her do manual labor for him. So, plan of revenge, all for something that happened in the past, and he never got over it. So, here we are. Clean up at all three. Oh boy. So yeah, the princesses get captured. They start torturing Liz in front of her friends, and this is probably the first time Lana and Beatrice ever see Liz get hurt in front of them. And Liz is actually a very strong girl. She's willing to get hurt to protect her friends, basically. So yeah, now they're on the train. They're heading to the state pen. I'm going to introduce you guys to a character who, let's just say, this is the reason why this episode ended up being on the back burner of many months. So if I just press play,
We shall help you through it.
I'll just advance a bit. The name on the subtitles is the name of the new character who basically was supposed to rise to fame, but then stuff happened in the background. Ladies and gentlemen, Warren T. Radigan. Now, I'm just gonna say it straight up. Yes, as the sprite owner, I took full responsibility for it. If I introduced him to the show, it would only be honorable if I took him out first, which is exactly what I had to do. So, because of the controversy that surrounded this character, first of all, this is a copyrighted character. This character belongs to Don Bluth of Don Bluth Films. And this is an animator who worked on lots of animations, that being Anastasia, An American Tail, to which Warren T. Rat is involved in. The problem is, this is a copyrighted character. Actually, there is a bigger controversy involved with this character. I was approached by an individual who asked me to make this specific character for a show that he wanted to produce on YouTube at the time. And unfortunately, what happened was, even though I made the character, I never got a simple thank you from this individual, to which definitely raised a red flag in me. And then when I found out exactly what happened a few days later, everybody was pretty much shocked when I found out that the owner of this character, the alleged owner, apparently was exposed online, and because of this, he left the internet and has not been seen since. And because of this, I had no choice but to kill off this character in that one episode, hence why we haven't seen him ever since. This character is no longer being involved in my show, and neither is the alleged creator responsible for stealing said copyrighted character. As I said before, the copyrighted character, he belongs to Don Bluth. He doesn't belong to this individual. And not to mention, I find it very disrespectful for this alleged owner to steal a copyrighted character as beloved as Warren T. Rat from American Tail by Don Bluth. I mean, it really is disgusting, and it really goes to show how low individuals can go just by stealing somebody's IP. And what's actually worse is that the person who actually asked me to make these sprites ended up getting in trouble himself. I mean, he ended up lashing out against his friends. A warrant was issued for his arrest. And yeah, now he's pretty much behind bars for as long as possible. And to be honest with you, I never had any drama with anybody over the last 14 years of spriting, but apparently this person allegedly had drama with me because he apparently blacklisted me from his community, even though I had no involvement with him whatsoever. He pretty much blacklisted me out of paranoia, and I even cut ties with this individual even after he lashed out against me just because of a hockey game. I mean, it's just a game. Don't take things personal. So yeah, anyway, because of these two individuals, this character was killed off. I am not bringing him back for another season or another episode. I'd rather prefer this copyrighted character stay dead, and that would be the end of it. At the end of the day, what we wanted to do was basically do a fight scene. Liz and Warren T are about to get in a fight, because why not? We haven't seen Liz fight in a long time, and it's a perfect opportunity for Liz to show off her skills. Also, FYI, what you're about to see in this episode when Liz fights Warren T, this is the move sets that Liz is going to have in Mugen. So pay attention, ARX fans. All the attacks you're about to see from Liz are the exact same attacks that the programmer is currently working on for Liz's character in Mugen Fight Night Fighters. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. So Clark Markson takes off with the limo. Liz goes back into the house. Liz goes back into the jail. We see Jeeves ready for one last hurrah. He notices what's happening, and then all hell breaks loose. So we got the teacher's lounge approaching Liz with their daggers. They fire solar beams with it because that's what, axes, swords, and daggers they do in this series. They use solar beams. And there we go. What you just saw was Liz kicking these three characters. And the kick, FYI, is a move that is featured in Liz's movesets. So, let's press on. So basically, Jeeves is explaining that, Warren T's already looking for you. Good luck, I hope you get captured again. So now, here we go. This is, so now we got Warren T with his pistol, Liz is behind, and there we go, palm strike. So, I should point out, the palm strike, yes, the palm strike is actually a moveset, and so is the kick that you see before you. So, to answer your question, ARX fans, no. The ducking and weaving is not part of Liz's movesets, but the palm strike and the kick are all part of the moveset as well. Now, this part right here, the Liz pushing Warren T into the wall, also is not part of the moveset. However, as you can actually see on screen, the body slam is part of the moveset. So this is actually her grab technique. So this gives us a perfect opportunity to bring back another beloved character. And this time we got the Specialist. So the Specialist was a character who actually butted heads with the antivirus in the past. And he actually fought Jeeves a couple of times in the past. So because Jeeves and Specialist are enemies, this was the perfect opportunity to have Specialist ruin the parade for Jeeves once again. And one thing I should mention, if you listen carefully,
follow me.
That voice. Lex Zorn. Lex Zorn is probably one of the biggest stars to ever come forth to Axer Rangers because, mind you, if you check his filmography on IMDb, it says a lot about him. But yeah, it really is an honor to have so many amazingly talented voice actors to show up and lend their voices for this episode. And that's actually the beauty about this episode. Despite the fact that we have this one character who is cringe, who is controversial, and that has a lot of copyright problems hanging over our heads, in the end, this was definitely an amazing episode to work on because of all the actors, all of the hard work that it took, all of the VFX that were put into this, and now here we are. This is the reunion scene. We have Liz, Lana, Beatrice reuniting. They all go for a hug. we see Clark, we see Alice, we see the baby Koopa, and then we see the specialist all on the side. And of course, you cannot end this episode without finally bringing up the fiancé himself, ladies and gentlemen. So, yeah. So I decided to end this episode with the antivirus meeting the girls for the very first time. So, yeah. This is the very scene where the antivirus gets to meet Lana and Beatrice. And again, as mentioned previously, Lana and Beatrice never knew about Liz's fiancé because Liz always kept it a secret. But now it's finally happening. Liz is finally introducing her fiancé to her best friends from school. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, I will confirm that this is going to be a reoccurring theme. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, I am excited to announce Lana and Beatrice will be back for future episodes. Warranty Rat will not. So, that's the good news. So, with that, yeah. Now we got the antivirus reuniting with Liz, Liz reuniting with her friends, and of course we got the specialist reuniting with the fiancé because, as I said before, those two have had history together. And of course, Void reuniting with Clark because Void helped Clark in the past. So, you know what? This is just one big reunion. Even though, as you could see, there's only 8 characters on scene, it's better than nothing. So, yeah. Now we can actually see they are ready to have some fun. They are heading towards the Stockholm Theater, ready for the gunslinging. This scene. For those of you who haven't seen the preview on my Discord server, basically what happened was I was playing one night with the crowd simulator. And the crowd simulator is actually by far easy at first, but then when you start adding things over it, it starts getting complicated. So basically, what crowd simulation is basically you take a sprite, you take a complete animation, you put it in the frame, and then you start duplicating the same sprite over and over and over again. The trick is, when you go to the transform tool, you have to assign the animation to different keyframes so that the movement is natural. Once you do that, congratulations, you just made an entire army of sprites. And you could do this with cattle, you could do this with zombies, hell, you can do this with snakes. And mind you, if you haven't seen the Toby Robin episode, Attack of the Swamp Snakes, yes, it is official, we did use Crowd Simulator on the Swamp Snakes. And now we're doing exactly the same thing with these bulls. And this was supposed to be the stampede that Warren T previously mentioned in the episode. So right now, we're doing exactly as they mentioned on the bus. Basically, Liz ties up Beatrice, and now Liz and Lana are heading to the theater, while poor Beatrice is left behind. So now we have the antivirus and Clark reuniting with each other, and then of course, the specialist, being the mysterious figure that he is, ends up walking away, because, I mean, his job is done. He's pretty much an assassin for hire. All he does is he goes there, kills the person, and that's it. That's pretty much what the specialist does. So, yeah. And then 2 months later, it happened. Both R4 and Liz both were programmed for Mugen. So both of their codes were programmed, altered, and manipulated in order to make their AIs decent, but at the same time, they were able to put up a fight against other characters in the roster. And mind you, this is months of testing, perfecting, and modifying the AI script in order to make these characters able to fight. Everything was all well and good, and then Dishonor for Honor happened, which I started doing multiple parts for this free preview event, to which, once again, it was just another wrestling event, nothing new, everything traditional, but then disaster struck. Sadly, the year I worked on Dishonor for Honor was also the very year where my hard drive died, and sadly, it pretty much wiped everything. Now, unfortunately, at the time, it was my only hard drive that I had. So because of this, I pretty much lost almost everything. I mean, I lost my work, I lost my sprites, I lost basically all the software that I've ever used. and I unfortunately had to enlist the help of an old hard drive that was stuck in my closet, and I even had to go as far as to outsource all the data that was taken from me, and most of the data was up on YouTube, to which, thank goodness, I was able to back up everything. Now, unfortunately, I did not get everything. I only managed to acquire 80% of the backup, but thankfully, I was able to get back on my feet, and for the first time ever, I was actually able to back up my files again. This time I did what's called a redundancy backup, where basically you have two drives, and basically your job is to clone both hard drives with the exact same files as expected. So in the event that one hard drive fails, you have the second hard drive as your backup. And then if your other hard drive fails, you buy another one, and once again you start recloning the drive over and over and over again. I mean, you get the idea what this redundancy backup really is. So because of that, now I have two hard drives, both 5 terabytes, and both containing all the files that I had with me, including everything that was backed up from my previous data recovery. So again, good news is I managed to back up 80% of it. Most of the stuff was at work, everything else was outsourced, and others were from a previous hard drive that I have stored in the closet. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what is left of my dead hard drive. So yeah, it was quite devastating. Devastating enough to the point that I had to actually restart Dishonor for Honor parts 3 to 7, to which, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not gonna lie, was the most painful experience to endure, but at the end of the day, I managed to make the free preview a lot better than the previous version, and I was finally able to sleep at night knowing that Dishonor for Honor had finally come to an end, and still to this day is by far my favorite free preview out of all of them. But then eventually, I finally reached out to Michelle Renee Harris, also known as Little Ball of Giggles, the original voice of those ASMR videos, and asked her to voice for Liz. And in the end, she accepted. Ladies and gentlemen, still to this day, Michelle Renee Harris is the voice of Liz. And I am very grateful to have her on board to continue the series. And so with the inclusion of Michelle Renee Harris, the series has continued to flourish, ladies and gentlemen. New episodes are being released, new movies are being worked on, and still to this day, Virus AI continues to be the strongest animated series in BioSoft Studios. So yeah, the best part about all of this is the fact that with the success of Virus AI, the fact that multiple individuals came forward to me and asked me if I can voice their characters in their own respective shows, it really goes to show that this spriting community is only growing bigger and bigger as time progresses. And you know what? It's never going to stop. It's only going to grow, and there's not a single thing that anybody can do about it because of how much popularity spriting is becoming nowadays. And you know what? At least more spriters are starting to step up to the plate, like Freeze Flame 22, El Calavera Productions, and all of these other amazing spriters who are basically taking the ball, running with it, and becoming as successful as Virus AI. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you guys for joining me as we delve into the past, the present, and the future of the channel. And ladies and gentlemen, all I'm going to say is thank you all so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for joining me on this amazing special presentation. I know it's not Axer Rangers X Day, as it usually is supposed to be Axer Rangers X Day on October 25th, 2009. But ladies and gentlemen, I just had to make this video because, ladies and gentlemen, so many things have happened over the years, and I just had to share it with you guys. So with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. Take care, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.